The horror movie genre underwent a huge transformation in the 1970s, largely because of the end of the Production Code Administration in 1968. The Motion Picture Production Code stated that no picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. So it basically forced films to edit out interracial relationships, profanity, sex, and much, much more. So The Exorcist would have basically been burned and thrown out if it had been written before 1968. So because everything was so novel, sex, violence, strong language, and stuff that would have been banned by the Motion Picture Production Code brought huge crowds to the theaters. And that's what facilitated the growth of the industry in the 1970s.
Additionally, there is some discussion among pop culture academics as to whether an increased presence of zombie fiction in the 80s is commentary on cultural movements. Massive undead hordes, incapable of thinking or feeling for themselves, driven by the perverse urge to destroy normal humans. Zombie films could serve as a timely meta-commentary on the goth culture itself. They can also, however, cast light on other mindless hordes that people in the 80s were concerned with. The idea of a global pandemic of a zombie virus also resonated with people in the 80s due to the ongoing AIDS crisis. At that point in time, losing one's well-being to a virus was possibly the scariest thing out there. 1985's Day of the Dead, the third film in George A. Romero's Dead series, portrays an apocalypse in which the government has become radically militarized but cripplingly ineffective against threats from the other, in this case zombies, a purposeful allusion to Cold War conflicts which were drawing to a close at the time. 1985 also saw the birth of the brain-eating zombie in The Return of the Living Dead. When pitted against a group of teenage punks, these monsters wanted not only flesh, but the core of their beings.
The gothic monster that best encapsulates the 1990s was Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter was a serial killer as well as a cannibal and renowned psychologist. His most famous appearance was in the 1991 film Silence of the Lambs, where he provided psychological analysis of other killers in exchange for the opportunity to psychoanalyze a young female FBI agent. The 1990s were a prosperous time. The Soviet Union had just collapsed in 1989, and all the fear of the Cold War had gone with it. Additionally, the 90s saw a large economic boom. The GDP of the United States grew 3, 4, and sometimes even 5% a year. The number of new jobs created in the 90s has yet to be matched to this day. Things were generally positive for the United States in the 90s. Perhaps people used characters like Hannibal Lecter as an emotional outlet for fear and hatred. It is simple for us to empathize with his refined tastes in music, art, and literature. We admire and almost envy him for being a powerful psychoanalyst, yet we are disgusted by his taste for human flesh. We both wish to be like him and are totally repulsed by him at the same time. That conflict and emotion struck a chord with the viewers in the 90s and continues to impact us today.
The zombies had a remarkable resurgence in the 21st century world of film and television, video games, and literature, where it resides in the shadows, slowly lumbering and hungering for human prey. The modern zombie is a creature that lives in the apocalyptic future. It isn't a product of voodoo or sorcery, but rather a product and omen of the failures of our society and civilization. The zombie is born of a mutated virus intended for curing cancer, or radioactive waste from the decrepit ruin of the plant called Chernobyl, or even the result of some mad scientist's scheme to ruin civilization as we know it. With tense international relations, the quickening pace of scientific advancement, and a growing environmental crisis, the end of civilization seems to be near in the 21st century. We're only 3 minutes to midnight on the famous doomsday clock, and the zombie eagerly shambles out of the shadows to sate its hunger for human flesh. And it's not alone. The moaning, inarticulate, and dumb monster isn't so fearsome on its own. Its true horror lies in its numbers. Unlike other monsters, such as the vampire, which are possible to kill, the zombie plague is an unstoppable force that grips the world and wipes out everything. The panic that zombies inspire is not one that makes us fear for ourselves, it is a fear of the end of times and the destruction of civilization as we know it.